who's going to be sitting next to you in that future MBA classroom that you dream of? Well, they always say, ask a busy person to take on a new project, but my next guest makes me dizzy with how many projects and accomplishments he's taken on. In fact, truly inspiring. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the CentreCourt MBA Festival, Andrew Leon Hanna. Andrew is a Stanford GSB MBA class of 2021. 2021, right, Andrew?
Two actually.
2022. Okay, well, we didn't want to take a year away. A Knight Hennessy Scholar, among other awards, but just a dizzy array from studying public policy at Duke, Harvard Law. He's an entrepreneur, an award-winning entrepreneur. He's a lawyer. He's an author. He's now a professor at Chicago Booth. Had experiences at McKinsey, at the UN, White House intern. The list goes on. But he's just a really, really inspiring and lovely man who has been working. He wrote a book. Stanford talks about change lives, change the world. Well, Andrew is changing 25 million lives. This book, 25 million Sparks, the untold story of refugee entrepreneurs. It was awarded the Financial Times Best Book of the Year. Let me stop there and welcome Andrew. And perhaps, Andrew, with all I've shared, how do you like to present yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. It's an honor to be here, and really appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I mean, how I would present myself, it's a great question. I think for me, I always kind of start with the why for what what's the thread between the different roles and positions and kind of experiences. And for me, it's how to create a world where people are treated more equally, and people are portrayed with dignity, and people are provided economic opportunity, and particularly those who are disadvantaged. For me, my parents immigrated from Egypt and created kind of a life of opportunity for me that I am super incredibly grateful for. And so a lot of my work in the last few years is focused on immigrant communities and more broadly refugee communities, as I've thought more about people who have not had the same kind of opportunities as me, or people who, rather than my parents who kind of chose to leave, were forced to leave and had even less when they started, and even more kind of difficulty. So that's kind of my work on refugees and immigrants. And in law school, the idea was to think about human rights and how people are treated equally under the law. So thinking about things like solitary confinement and prison conditions, and asylum-seeking children. And then through social entrepreneurship and writing, the idea was, and film was, the idea was, how do I tell a story that creates greater unity by empowering and uplifting the voice of those who are misunderstood or disadvantaged. So unemployed youth, immigrant entrepreneurs, refugee entrepreneurs, veterans, groups that are often cast in a certain way, but we should better understand their full stories.
We'll be concluding the CentreCourt Festival with a fireside chat with the Dean of Stanford, Jonathan Levin. And we regularly host Kirsten Moss, who of course was the Associate Dean at the school, Will Torres, and many other members of the team. And they have this iconic essay question at Stanford that you yourself answered, of what matters most to you and why. With everything that you describe, that intentionality, that sense of purpose, was thinking about that Stanford essay actually helpful to then put together all these many organizations, projects that you've taken on?
Yeah, it definitely was. I really like the question, because actually, I guess what I just answered was sort of my answer to the question probably in the essay, although it obviously evolves. I think what I've tried to think about throughout my life, and definitely at Stanford, because business school, it can be very hectic in terms of there's a million things going on. But if you can sort of, my perspective is, if you can sort of tap into, what makes you come alive. So one of my favorite quotes is from Howard Thurman: "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do it, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive." So I often think about, if I'm really like not interested in something or feeling like I'm going through the motions, like what is it that makes me come alive, like makes my heart kind of feel more connected, more excited. And I think the question in the essay, I think, does a good job of getting at that. Very simply, what matters most to you and why. And for me, it was kind of all about how to treat people equally, how to make sure those who are in vulnerable situations their voice is uplifted, and they're provided the opportunities they deserve. Because at the end of the day, we're all kind of equal human beings, and just different circumstances led to different opportunity sets and different treatment. And so, yeah, throughout Stanford, amidst the busyness, it was helpful to try to reset to that, because, like in any community, you start gravitating towards whatever is cool at the time or whatever a lot of people are doing. And so, thankfully there was a good social impact presence there, a big entrepreneurial presence, of course, because in the kind of Bay Area. And so it was helpful to just channel those resources into what I felt like I was meant to do.
Right. I can almost hear, whether it's the pens on a notepad or people typing into their smartphones, and the things that make you come alive. And thank you for that level of sort of openness. In terms of Harvard Law, and for many that might have been enough, but also the idea of business school. What was it that led you to combine those two, and also decide that an MBA from Stanford was worth the investment?
Yeah, it's a good question. Definitely the investment part is something important to think about. For me, it would have been tough to pay for both, I think, or to take out the loans for both. Thankfully, I got the Knight Hennessy Scholarship at Stanford, which is a full scholarship, and definitely encourage anyone to apply. And also Stanford has great financial aid, as does Booth and many other schools. But for me, I had a financial aid offer that was really good before. Then I went to law school. But then even then I was feeling, it would be tough to spend, to handle even more loans. Thankfully, the scholarship worked out. But for me, law school, in retrospect, I'm really, really glad I went to Stanford GSB and went to business school in addition. And I'm really grateful that it worked out, because I think law school was great in terms of part of my kind of vision in life, or part of, and I wasn't like planning this ahead, but in retrospect, you realize law school, I think, made me a lot sharper in terms of writing, in terms of like analytical arguments. Obviously, having the law degree and the ability to practice law, I think, is very helpful in life. And it made me think more systemically about the issues facing disadvantaged groups, whether it be, historically and today, just going through kind of the path of civil rights and human rights that we've gone through. So that's all been very fascinating, and the ability and the power to kind of represent someone when needed is really important. What business school did was like a whole nother level of, dreaming big, I think, and creativity. So law school sometimes can feel a bit constraining because, it's by nature, you're constrained to the law, you're constrained to the processes. It's a bit of a hierarchical profession sometimes. It's a bit circumscribed, whereas when I got to Stanford, it was like, wow, people are really encouraging me to do whatever I want. And, I think, that leads to some more responsibility and some more having to cut down and think again about what makes you come alive, and be smart about what you're choosing. But it felt like it was an explosion of opportunity and thought about what is it that you want to do in the world, and let's make it happen. Let's get the resources. Let's mobilize the people in a way that I don't think I had been exposed to in any other situation. And a lot of that is the entrepreneurial vibe. And a lot of that is the kind of area it's in, I think. A lot of people thinking very creatively in big ways.
So the explosion of ideas in this entrepreneurial setting, some people might just think, well, isn't it just like a 2-year long touchy-feely course? And that is part of the many courses that you can study at Stanford. Tell us a little bit about, the learning experience itself, and how you can personalize that workload.
Yes, I think it was a great experience. I think the first year tends to be more set for you, especially the first 2 quarters. So Stanford's on the quarter system. And so the first 2 quarters, is a little more set for you in terms of the predetermined core curriculum. The third quarter, starting in the second, there becomes more flexibility. And then it tends to be the third feels a lot more flexible because you've done most of the requirements at that point usually. And then the second year is basically completely open. I actually found the first year to be more intensive maybe than I thought, but it was for a good reason. I was excited to kind of, I had done consulting for a couple of years, but I felt like I hadn't really mastered any of the the basics. I think I had done a good job, but never like fully ingrained in some of the like accounting and finance things that I was trying to put into practice. And so taking some of those core classes helped a lot. And then the second year becomes just an amazing kind of experience because you've gone through kind of the more perhaps more like, for me, a lot of the classes had day-to-day homework, a lot of things like that, that really were trying to ingrain basic principles, in a lot of cases. And so the second year felt like it was all electives. It was a lot more free. So, it wasn't day-to-day work necessarily. It was obviously reading and things like that, but it was more bigger projects. Even in the spring, I took a class on creativity and business ecosystems, and the final project was to do kind of an Amazon style PR FAQ, so press release and FAQ, frequently asked questions on any project. And so that's actually how Mona started. And then over the summer, I got funding from the Center for Social Innovation to continue, working on Mona and also through Knight Hennessy. And then in the second year, I could kind of tailor my experience a little bit towards what I was thinking about with launching that venture. So it's kind of nice to have the core, common kind of things that you need, and then it starts opening up and you can start tailoring it in ways that you can kind of focus on what you do. And a lot of people who did entrepreneurial ventures spent much of the second year kind of taking entrepreneurship classes like that.
Well, let's go to Mona, which celebrates underrepresented entrepreneurs, SAWA for underrepresented artists. How do you feel that the Stanford experience and its structure, perhaps focusing on that as a summer internship, and obviously then emerging in the summer of 2022, how did it prepare you to build that business, launch these two fantastic ventures?
Yeah, it was good. It was, I think the first step is really what I mentioned, which is just believing that you can. So I think I wrote in my essay that I wanted to launch a global kind of social enterprise. And I think at the time I hadn't been exposed to as much about how to do that. And so that's my theory, actually, in the end, I think was fairly correct, which is law school wasn't necessarily going to be as much of that, although I spent time at the innovation lab and other things. And business school would be much more of a crash course in understanding how to launch and scale something really big. And so I think even just the broadening my horizon and feeling like, oh, I can actually do this. I think that's often so much what limits us, is feeling like you can actually do something and then setting that as your goal, and not limiting yourself. So that was number one. And then number two, the funding and support to do that kind of summer with the Center for Social Innovation. The funding was not even necessarily about the idea. It was like, this is a problem area I want to dig into. And I had already done a lot of work related to small businesses run by underrepresented entrepreneurs. During the pandemic, we did a lot of zero interest loans to immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs. And so this was a problem area I wanted to work on. And so providing that internship support to do that and just explore was, it was one of the first times in my life I think I wasn't just running 100% on a task. So when I had a job or when I was in law school or even business school, it was just kind of running. And so having that space was really big. And then the second year, like I said, it really opens it up to, now I have this idea in mind that worked decently well over the summer. How can I continue to work on it, start looking for funding, and start keeping my ears perked for ways that it could continue to grow.
So it starts to take wing. And at the same time, we describe the GSB as the fun. There you've got 430 of your classmates, plus either the year ones, depending on where you're at in the schedule. So, a lot of people on the campus. Share a little bit about perhaps the culture of support, even brainstorming ideas together, beta testing what you're working on, and also having fun in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, I think there's a big culture of support. So I was very excited by that. It felt like there was a very high level of encouragement among classmates that I hadn't seen in a lot of other circumstances, and I was really excited by that. And I do think I think most of it, if not all of it, is genuine. Some people would cynically say, oh, business school, like people just building their network. I personally found it to be really refreshing and genuine. And I think part of it is the tone that you mentioned with the class touchy-feely and the art, the essay question, even like Kirsten Moss herself kind of setting that tone. Like there's very much of a tone of, genuineness, authenticity, kindness, and wanting to change the world in a big way. And so, I personally felt really encouraged by the community. I ended up launching the book that you mentioned right before I graduated, and so many people came out to the book talk and were so encouraging about it. And it really felt like a genuine level of excitement when someone else was succeeding or doing something that they cared about or manifesting what they cared about. And part of it with business school too is a little different than law school, and definitely at GSB. People are doing so many different things that it doesn't necessarily feel competitive or it only seems natural to encourage someone on the path. And I think in business school, people do also realize a little more like if this person's successful, that could be, a partnership for me down the road, which is a good thing too. But no, I generally felt a lot of kind of authentic kindness. And I think classes like Touchy-Feely, which, are focused again on like interpersonal dynamics and how do things make you feel? How does the way you speak land on people? I think that stuff further ingrains the message that we're not just here to climb a hierarchy, but we're here to make an impact on people that is, well received and touches their lives.
There's perhaps a natural question as I think about, keeping up with class, building Mona as a venture, writing a book that the FT awards Best Book of the Year. And I'm going to repeat the title because I want everybody watching CentreCourt to go out and get a copy of this book. It's 25 Million Sparks, The Untold Story of Refugee Entrepreneurs. When did you sleep? Is time management a part of the program and how you can take on all these different projects?
Yeah, I think time management is tough. I actually had the unique experience of starting during the first year or during the most intense year of COVID, so 2020. And so part of it was, I was pretty observant about all the rules. So there wasn't a ton to do. It was interesting the way it manifested at GSB. People were taking a lot of one-on-one walks. And so outdoor walks like to Memorial Church in the area. And so that was mostly what I did socially. So I think the first year was incredibly productive because I actually also was taking the bar exam. So it was very intense. And that's a long story about the way the bar exam had been deferred. And so it ended up right in the middle of the first quarter. But yeah, I think I just tended to have more time. Then when the second year that was the much more normal business school or GSB experience, then you start really realizing, okay, everyone kind of is meeting up and there's a lot of time pressure. But I think what you can do is just like one thing I really believe in is like blocking out time for whatever you need, whether it's a nap or, if you need to catch up on work intensely, like block out on your calendar and then nobody can kind of take that time. So, I think you can always, from a distance, it probably seems like, oh, you're crazy busy. But I think if you really do guard your time like that, it doesn't, I was probably much less busy than others who, were doing every social event or whatever it may be.
I was going to ask you, what had perhaps surprised you most about the Stanford experience. I'm going to slightly modify that. What surprised you most about what you learned about yourself in an environment that you've described as being incredibly supportive, encouraging? I mean, you yourself look to unlock the potential of others. Is that part of the secret?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, it business school, I think, also can be sort of a time to reflect on your own, like who you've become and who you're becoming. Um, I remember thinking a lot of my time at business school, I remember thinking about my own kind of growth and how I felt different coming into business school than I did at law school, when I was a bit younger coming in. And so, part of, I think, what positively surprised me, or what positively surprised me about myself, was I felt a lot more confident. I felt a lot more kind of um, comfortable with who I am in a way that I always thought I was, but in law school, I think maybe I had lost a little bit of that early on. Just simple things like when you speak in class or when you interact with people, do you feel comfortable with who you are? And I think experiences like business school can be an interesting time to get that right, or to work on that. You're never going to get it fully right, but and I felt like that a lot of people were dealing with that, because there is, one thing that surprised me generally, not about myself, but generally, was there was a lot of like maybe fear of missing out, and a lot of people wanted to release that and have like a joy of missing out type atmosphere. And so um, part of it too, like dealing with that experience with so much social interaction with class, with different options for what you want to do with your life, I think a lot of it can be pressure, but it can also be a good opportunity to refine who you are, refine your voice. What are you going to speak about in class? What are you going to spend your time on? How are you going to interact with people? How are you going to set your schedule? I think for me, it was like a refreshing experience to sort of say, okay, I've grown a lot actually since I was in college, since I was started out in consulting. And this is what I'm starting to cement my values at. And this is what it might look like in career. And I also met my amazing fiance, who I just became engaged to her. I just proposed a week ago, or 2 weeks ago. I met her through a class at GSB. So this is like the best. They need to write an article about this pretty quickly. But there was a class that was, again, kind of targeted on the touchy-feely element of things. It was pairing people together randomly to do the New York Times questions to fall in love thing. And the idea was to point out that you can really get to know a teammate at a pretty deep level and feel a sense of trust pretty quickly if you just ask some thoughtful questions. I don't think he thought that I would end up getting engaged for that, or that anyone would, but me and my partner Annie were paired together, and so that was kind of a cool experience. And so now he's gonna share that picture in his classes.
Hey, well, congratulations to both of you. I was going to say, looking back, the experience and what it's given you, maybe that's the true answer. You're a year out of school, and a lot of my colleagues have just been back for their 25th reunion. It was the best attended of all time. An incredible energy, everybody getting together. How do you get the sense that Stanford will continue to then contribute to Mona, to Sawa, the next book that you write? I know that you've got many more ventures in the pipeline.
Yeah, thank you. I think definitely the fiance is a big part of it. Yeah, but I guess that's just a more amplified version of the friendships. I mean, I've definitely seen more so than law school for sure. A continued um a continued group feeling and group identity just through WhatsApp and things like that. But then also like individual friendships, I feel that probably isn't the case for everyone, but I'm not somebody who's great at keeping in touch with people. So I thought maybe outside of Annie, I wouldn't necessarily continue to be close with a lot of people, but I really have. I feel like there is a sense of closeness that's entrenched during the 2 years. The 1 year reunion was attended pretty widely. Like I said, there's a lot of WhatsApp activity, things like that. It feels like you're still a part of the class, which I didn't always feel like that in other situations. And I also think there's a high culture of reaching out. So like even if someone in the class I didn't know very well reached out about, hey, I want to start writing as well. I really appreciate what you've done. In a second, like I'll respond. because I think there's some respect for like we were in this class together and it was part of our experience. So I think there's a high level of kind of affinity towards that.
I'm going to bring us full circle for my final question, because viewers might be saying, yeah, but I mean, look at Andrew, through his studies, working at the White House, working at McKinsey, the UN and UNESCO, the books that he's written, no brainer for Kirsten and the team to offer him a place. But your advice to anybody, thinking about business school, thinking about the GSB, what would it be? You don't have to be a best-selling author or an award-winning entrepreneur to be able to secure your place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, my main advice is to apply, because I think, uh, again, like, the things that you see when you look at my biography, there's probably 1,000 more things I applied for that got rejected for that. And it got to a point where, it's probably unsustainable to apply like crazy to whatever comes to your mind. But I really like, sometimes I would get email rejections about something I applied for, and I'd be like, I didn't even remember applying for that. So I mean, all that is to say, like, you see the successes, everybody knows that you see the successes, but there's a lot of negatives throughout the process. So, I think it's worth applying, and it's worth believing that you can get in, and it's worth kind of putting your all into it and being genuine about it, and then just seeing what happens. Because in terms of advice, more tactically, I think really think about the essay, really think about what makes you come alive, and think about at a deep level, and then what that has meant for your life till now and what it would look like going forward. You know, I think about think about all those things, and then once you get here, there'll be a space for you. For me, there was all kinds of communities that meant a lot to me. So there's like a peer mentor community, the Black community, the Middle Eastern community, the Christian community. There were a lot of communities that I either was a part of or felt welcomed by, that will kind of make it a good experience for you. So there were definitely times where people there were definitely times where it felt difficult, that it felt like you don't belong, or that it feels like the experience isn't fully what you thought it would be. But you'll have those communities, those affinity groups, no matter who you are, where you'll feel like you do belong, and you'll be able to turn kind of whatever your business school experience is into something special. And just having those 2 years to reflect and stop, I think is invaluable. And so, like I said, I think it can be a great personal growth experience no matter where you go. And I think it's worth applying with all your heart, and then just seeing what happens.
Well, you admitted that you're not very good at keeping in touch, but I'm not going to let go. When I discovered your story, and we covered it 18 months ago, you already inspiring what you're doing. And I hope that we can continue to support that in just a small way when I think about how you're supporting others to achieve their potential. Andrew, thank you for joining us at the CentreCourt MBA Festival, even just to give people a sense of what is possible and inspiring their next steps. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Matt. Likewise, it means a lot. I appreciate it.